So we do have a lot of free services on here. And I think that's an important thing for students to know, especially because not every PI wants to support everybody's exploratory work on projects that might not be related to the things that they're doing. So if you have that, we have a lot of free services that you can use for doing free computation, free storage, and you'll have access to the HPC. If you have much more demanding workloads, if you want more consistency, longer run times, if you want more storage, which many do, then we have some fee schedules that will cover that. So the free tier is limited to 3 hours. It has a limited pool of CPU and GPU nodes, and it's the lowest priority job. So the way that a lot of high performance computing systems work, and ours is no exception, is that you submit jobs into a queue, and those jobs get prioritized and then executed as their priority comes up. The free tier has the lowest priority of all the jobs. That doesn't mean they won't go through. It just means that they will be unlikely to be the first processed if there are others that are coming in front of it. It does use a fair tree algorithm, though. So what that tries to do is balance everyone's needs over time. So it should not be the case that free jobs will always be would always be prioritized less than anything else. It's just that they typically sit further down on the queue on average. For our tier 1, the time limit increases to 24 hours. These jobs have essentially medium priority in the grand scheme of things. And then for our highest tier right now, tier 2, those are time limited to 1 week, and they tend to have the highest priority among all the jobs that get submitted. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yes, they do. Yeah, so the only difference between tier 1 and tier 2 really is runtime and priority. So right now, yeah. Go ahead, Steve. That's very true. Yes, and that's an important point. I've actually gotten that question quite a few times. I'm glad you brought it up because I tend to forget to mention this. This is 1 week per job. You can put as many jobs as you want into the queue, but each job can only run for 1 week if you're in tier 1 and tier 2, or for 3 hours if you're in the free tier, or 1 week in tier 2, 24 hours in tier 1, and 3 hours if you're in the free tier. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, yeah. So Steve was commenting that that the time limits that are mentioned on the slides are not a total for PIs, that they are on a per job basis. So, sorry, go ahead.
24 hours. Let's say the job would take 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You can run for 24 hours, keep down you, and then it takes you back and run the 24 hours, or the 5.
Yeah, it means that it's kicked out after 24 hours. But one of the techniques that people typically do is that you daisy chain your jobs. And so you'll have one job that you submit that's dependent on that preceding job. And people often use checkpointing. So you'll usually checkpoint your work at the end of that 24 hours, and then you'll read that checkpoint back in at the start of the next job. So thanks, Paul. So Paul was asking, for those on Zoom that can't hear, he was asking if you have a 48-hour job and you're limited to 24 hours, what happens? And so I was explaining what happens in that case. So we have these 2 tiers that are charged differently based on priority, but you can pay for this in 2 different ways. You can either pay for it through a subscription, and this works really well, I think, for people that have grants that you really want to have a predictable price, and you don't necessarily know how much computation it'll take, but it'll take a lot. The subscription is usually a pretty good option for people, and it's easy to write in. But we also offer a consumption-based plan, and this seems to be fairly popular for those departments that are fine with the uncertainty of how much computation will be done and are looking really to pay on an a la carte basis. And so both of these are can be independently used to pay for these kinds of resources. And I'd like to point out that I've tried to leave this QR code up here on, oh, sorry, Amelia. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, that's totally possible. Just, you know, contact us and we'll try to set that up. So Amelia was asking, if you, let's say you have a lower priority queue typically, but you end up having a project that might need high priority for a week or two, you can just call us up, let us know, we'll put that in and make sure that you have that, and that will be, you know, charged appropriately. Steve.
I think you bill quarterly.
Yes.
So if I'm on the consumption model, will there be a portal sometime in the future, right? Kind of where I am. Like,
Yes.
Today, but
Indeed, there will. Okay, so Steve was asking, because the consumption-based model, you know, you don't necessarily have a deterministic costs, how will you be able to find out your, you know, your actual consumption before the quarterly invoicing periods? And he was asking, is there going to be a portal available? And yes, we are working on that right now. We've actually had some really good ideas from both Dennis and Moises on how to do that. And really, it's just an issue of you know, having enough time to put that in place. In the meantime, though, we are going to be sending out, and I'm just preparing those now, just email updates at the end of every month about what everyone's consumption is, what they can expect for fees, so we can be, you know, transparent. But we would like to move to that model where you can pull it as well.
monthly, sorry.
Excellent. Sounds great. Yeah, and you know, I think that that's really important because it's very hard, and we've watched this as well. We were watching this kind of at the end of the last fiscal year about how consumption was happening on the computing systems, and it seems to be punctuated by very heavy periods of usage for a lot of users. And so I think it's really important that we have increased the frequency with which we update our PIs. So with the subscription model, there are two kind of resource pools that you can buy into. There are many users that don't have interest in the GPU accelerated nodes. And so if you don't want to use those, we have like a CPU only resource pool that you can buy into. And for the tier 1, that's $6,000 a year. For tier 2, that's $12,000 a year. If you want to add GPU acceleration into that, and we have a ton of GPU capacity right now that's about to come online, that's going to be $10,000 a year for tier 1 and $20,000 for tier 2. Once we deploy some of the really heavy GPUs, these H100s are monsters. They are very fast. Then we're also going to have a third tier to charge for that as well. They are exceptional cards. But you'll hear more about that later today from the noon to 1 or from the noon to 1 period when our partners at NVIDIA come to talk. But pretty exciting. We do also offer additional scratch storage space. So scratch storage, again, is that really high speed storage space. We don't really expect people to store data there for long periods of time, but there are some users that need their data set resident in very high speed storage because they do a lot of processing on it, and maybe the quota is not enough to do that. So we do offer that option, but for the most part, most people I think are interested in our large volume storage, which we charge at a fairly standard rate. This is pretty standard across the university, different services, even within what our charges were from the SDS of $160 a year per terabyte. Yeah, Ben.
Is it also true that if you're getting large volume storage involved, like 100 terabytes at a time,
yeah,
more capable things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So Ben was asking if you buy large amounts, like large blocks of storage, is it still this $160 per terabyte? And no, just contact us. We're still kind of trying to work out what the larger allocations are looking like, but we're pretty flexible on negotiating prices for that at those large scales. Because, you know, 160 a terabyte, I think it's more appropriate for smaller data storage applications. And when you start talking about petabytes, well, that can be pretty large. For our consumption-based model, where you actually pay on a per hour basis for all of the computational resources, we just have a schedule, and that's based kind of on which of the resources you're using. Most people are interested in the CPU, and so that's the leftmost column. We have a bunch of different GPU types, and because they all have a lot different capabilities, we charge differently based on which GPU you're using. But if you're not interested in that, focus on the CPU. So the amounts here are based on per core hour for CPUs and per card hour for the GPUs. And each one of these GPU cards has quite a few streaming multiprocessors. So you're getting quite a few processors for that price. To give you just a sense of how much this usually goes for on the open market, so like if you're looking at Google Cloud Platform or AWS, and these are a little bit stale, but ostensibly these are relatively correct. Well, first of all, it's extremely hard to get. In my own anecdotal experience, it's very hard to get these instances because there's a lot of demand on these cloud platforms right now for GPUs. They're extremely popular for doing large language model development as well as other AI development, and there just aren't enough cards out there. And so it's often very difficult to get these kinds of instances. But if you're lucky enough to get them, you have to buy them in 8 card increments. So you better have a workload that can use 8 A100s, and they are usually more expensive by a fairly decent amount. So we've tried to price these much lower than you would find on the open market. For some PIs, it's just not interesting to be having to worry about being in the queue. We have found that some people just want to have their own machines as well. And if you want to do that, we offer an option where you can go through us, buy your own hardware, and we will keep it in our data facility. We'll make sure it gets administered. We'll make sure it gets updated, and we'll make sure it has connection to the shared storage. So all that 18 petabytes of storage that we have sitting there with all of these data sets, this will be connected in with our InfiniBand interconnect. That's something I guess I didn't really describe, is that all of this computational hardware is networked with a very, very high throughput, very low latency network technology called InfiniBand. And so this gives you extremely fast access to this data that's stored on Ceph on our large volume. So what we would do is you would contact us. We would go and work with our vendors because we have pre-existing relationships, and try to get you a really good price. And then we'll put that equipment inside of our data facility in one of the racks and get it all configured, imaged, and you'll have access to it through the batch processing system. And we're pretty flexible on how we do this. There are some PIs that just want complete access to it, locked down for their group. We're happy to do that. If you are so inclined, and we really would rather do this, if you are so inclined to share your computers when you're not using them, then we also offer to credit that time that you've lent out back in case you want to use the other shared resources. So let's say you have a really large job you want to run. You're going to use, I don't know, 20 GPUs, and you only bought 4. Well, it's kind of nice to use that credit that you lent out to pay for those big jobs. And so this also includes our basic storage, just as we would with any free plan. If you want larger amounts of storage, you would also pay for them in the same way that you would pay for shared storage any other way. Our storage, as I said, is $160 per terabyte per year. But if you have specialized data needs, if you want extra high-speed scratch space, or you want discounts for larger amounts of shared storage, contact us. We'll be happy to do that. We also offer archival storage, and currently we don't charge for that. Mostly we're trying to support people that have left the university. We like to, cache their data so that they can retrieve it back again. But we have you have other archival data needs where you just need read-only access. We can also discuss that as well. And as long as it doesn't get abused, I think we're pretty happy to host it for now. We also have some free options with our stored data sets. The beauty of having this S10 grant was that as part of this, we are able to host some data sets for free. And so the data sets that we currently have listed are those that we're hosting for free. So you can access those. You can create derivative products off of those. And that's all covered by the S10 grant and institutional support for our data managers.